Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is November 8th, 2020, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I'm here in the beautiful capital of California, Sacramento. And we're here today with Mr. Ron Scholefield, and we identify him as a forensic graphic artist. I'm sorry, forensic graphic analyst, amongst his many other accomplishments. And he's going to be doing a really interesting study, a breakdown, a forensic breakdown on the famed photographer Dorthea Lange. And Ron will explain who she is. But first of all, Ron, could you just give us a sort of a quick nutshell synopsis of a long and illustrious and exciting, very interesting career, which hopefully we can talk about in depth at another time once we go through the Dorthea Lange. So Ron, could you take that for us,
Sure.
please?
Yes, and Daryl, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really fun. Um, yeah, I started my professional career as a cartoonist, working in the animation industry. I had a long, happy career with Walt Disney in Burbank, and toward the end of my time at Disney, I suddenly took a huge interest in photography, and I turned that into a professional skill. I shot for 8 years as a corporate photographer. And as a child, somewhere when I in my childhood, I realized that I had a special talent for what's now called facial gestalt. Facial gestalt. I didn't know that at the time, and so I'm going to today. I want to talk about the migrant mother photo shoot, which includes probably the most famous photograph taken in the United States. Um, it's a big story uh, because it's all about the Farm Security Administration, uh, FDR's support of the monopolists, big agriculture. Uh, Dorthea Lange uh, was the photographer, and she is already uh, a huge uh, she's one of the giants of photographic history worldwide. Um, but at the time that she took this photograph, she was working for the Farm Security Administration. She was work for hire, and she was following a creative brief that was given to her and all the photographers by her boss, Roy Stryker. And the creative brief was very simple. He would just list what he wanted to see in the images. And he gave directions like poverty, hopelessness, destitution, starvation, struggle. So the photographers went out to try to find that.
Now, Ron, let me interrupt you for a second. Are those the terms that he used? Those exact terms? Or are you summarizing it?
I'm
Striker.
summarizing, but
Okay.
in another conversation, I can produce the actual creative briefs, and it's astonishing uh, how
Great.
he was directing the people because he was an art director in that capacity. He was really an art director. It was a huge new program uh, that the government started, and it was, I think, the first documentary photojournalism uh, program that the government ever worked on.
Even
So
before the films of the propaganda films like Frank Capra, The Signal Corps, and World War II, this really
yeah,
was the predecessor to
yeah,
that.
because this started. I think It started in 33. It was called the Resettlement Administration at that point. They changed names in 1935 to the Farm Security Administration.
Hmm.
And another thing I should mention, you know, Dorthea Lange, as I've said, she's a giant in photography history. And at the time she took the photograph, the migrant mother photograph, she was married to Paul Taylor. Paul Taylor's a good guy. He spent he was an economist. He worked at UC Berkeley, and he spent his whole career working to improve the conditions of migrant workers, farmers, and he was in support of the small farm. Now that's in direct conflict with FDR's program. FDR was trying to produce propaganda to support mechanized farming, big agriculture.
Wow.
He did not like small farms. He wanted them consolidated, and you know he always supported the monopolists. They called them mercantilists back then. It's another story. We don't have time for that, but that's the background. So and I should say, because I'm walking out on the edge here, criticizing Dorthea Lange. I mean, she's a big hero in the U.S. So what I see, what I've gleaned from my research, is that she was an enthusiastic propagandist. She even said at one point, I don't know why propaganda is a dirty word.
Hmm.
All right. Now, I think she thought that following the creative brief was supporting the work of her husband, Paul Taylor. I don't think she realized that it was really in support of big agriculture. So I should say that. So I've got some notes here. I'm sorry if I look down from the camera. I just want to make sure I stay on track and I keep us within a reasonable time.
That's an excellent introduction. It really provides, I mean, I've already learned so much in 5 minutes here.
All
You're
right.
taking down like in the overused word, an icon, right? An icon of American or international photography. But that's what we do on this channel, Ron.
All right. Well, at the end of my presentation, or the end of this discussion, I will make reference to and bring Dorthea back to the position that she holds now, and that's based on her photographs of the Japanese American incarceration.
Right.
Okay, those and the irony there is we haven't seen most of those photos. So, but I'll talk about that at the end. So, okay, so what I think we have, what we're going to discuss is this photo shoot that occurred, and I should now probably switch to a few visuals, if you don't mind. There we go. Can we see that?
Yes, perfectly.
All
Let
right.
me center it in my screen here. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Great.
this is what the government has always referred to as the migrant mother. It's got to be one of the top 10 most famous photos worldwide. And I'm sure much of your audience has seen this photo and they're familiar with it because it's been so widely published over the past 80 years. I think the way I see it, I think this photo was the result of a paparazzi looking for the money shot. And that's the controversy about Dorthea Lange. She was enthusiastic. She was in pursuit of answering the creative brief, fulfilling the creative brief. And the money shot, of course, is handing that into your boss and getting paid and getting further assignments. So this photo was taken in March of 1936 in Nipomo, California. And Nipomo is at the southern end of the coastal valley of California. It extends all the way from, let's say, Santa Maria, all the way up to Palo Alto. And when I was a kid, I grew up in California, so very familiar with the territory all the way from LA up to San Francisco. I've driven on 101 many, many times. So Dorthea was driving home to Berkeley. She was driving north home to Berkeley, and she says she saw something interesting, and she drove further north. She drove past Nipomo. She was thinking about it, and then she says she turned around and drove back and showed up on the scene. Now I want to go through the photos, and I'm calling this the migrant mother photo shoot. So, all right. So thinking like a paparazzi, I'm going to describe it that way. This is the first shot. Dorthea's gotten out of the car. She has her camera, and her car is probably right behind her, and she's walking toward this lean-to. And this is a grab shot. You can see by the body language of her subjects that they don't want her there. And so she grabs the shot. Now, you've got to remember that Dorthea was a very skilled photographer, and everything was manual then. They didn't have light meters. You had to know your settings, and you can see that this is a poorly photographed image. It's therefore it's a grab shot. It's slightly out of focus, and it's not in the Library of Congress. All of let's see, 5 of the photos are in the Library of Congress. This one isn't. I think it's in the collection with the Oakland Museum. Now that's very interesting because it tells a different story. And it's, in my opinion, only analyzing these photos, this is the first shot. All right. She's about 20 feet, maybe 10 feet away, and there would have been some conversation. And I think what was said was, "I'm from the government. I'm a photographer. I'm assigned to photograph people in your condition, migrant workers," something like that. And she moves closer, and she promises, and based on Florence's story, and I should mention now that the migrant mother is really, her name was Florence Owens Thompson. So I'm going to refer to her as Florence, because we find out 43 years later, we get the other side of the story. And in Florence's story, she said that Dorthea promised she wouldn't publish them. And Dorthea is still working the scene, and she senses there's a money shot here. She's within 2 or 3 feet. So she's working at the area. That's what photojournalists do. They just move around and they wait to see it. And on her 4th shot, she got it. She found it. And that's it. Migrant mother. And now we can't go into all the stories about this shot. I mean, it's just such a huge subject. Books have been written about it. Scholars, a lot smarter than me, they've analyzed and discussed it. But I recently, just a couple of days ago, I came across a book where the guy says, a published book, which I just ordered, by the way. I can't wait to get it because I want to read it and find out. He says this was posed. And, you know, I looked at this, and I've heard that before, and I looked at this photo and I think, well, you know, because the little girl's looking away so that you focus your attention on Florence's face. Yeah, it's a pretty cool setup, pretty good composition. But I was in Jiffy Lube one time in the waiting room, and I saw a mother and 2 daughters, and a very similar composition formed right in front of me. So I knew, you know, this probably wasn't posed. That's Dorthea didn't go that far. So, and another reason I know that it's the money shot for sure, but I know that it's not a perfect composition, because if she was going to pose the shot, she would have excluded. Let me see. I got to use my. Can you see my cursor here?
Oh, yes.
All right. This is one of the poles supporting the lean-to, and she would have framed it so that wasn't seen. And someone, probably Dorthea, tried to erase Florence's hand, which is she's supporting herself with her left arm on this post. So that kind of imperfection tells me that this was straight photojournalism. All right. Then this is a backup shot, meaning she might as well get one more in the camera, but she already knows she's got the money shot. So she's not going to waste any more time trying to work the scene and get something better. Okay, and then you come to, this is the 6th shot in the series. And I've assigned, I'm sorry, it's the 5th shot in the series. Is that correct? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I've mislabeled that. Very sorry. It is the 6th shot. This is also not to be found in the Library of Congress. Okay. And I came across this online. I stopped in my tracks because, you know, I'm always doing research on this, and I'd never seen this before. Look at that. Look at that. Those eyes. Look at the look that Florence is giving the camera. This is the first time that she looks at the camera in the photo shoot. And you can see she never changes her expression. Okay. Now, in terms of paparazzi, Um, People know about modern paparazzi. They know about celebrities being confronted with paparazzi photographers. And that's essentially what this was in 1936. And celebrities, though, are very sophisticated. They what they do when they see a paparazzi, they adopt a neutral face, and they don't give anger like they used to. You know, they used to blow up and get in confrontations. Not anymore. They just they just have a neutral face. They don't show anger and they don't show happiness, or they don't laugh and smile, and they never look at the camera. And the reason they do that is because the paparazzi will know within 2 or 3 shots he's not going to get anything of value, and he'll go off and try to find another subject. So it gets them out of the area quicker. And that's what I think Dorthea was doing. And we'll talk about that in a second when we hear her side of the story. And then this is the final shot in the series. Dorthea is relaxed now because she's got the money shot. This is really the establishing shot. This is to show the conditions that these people were in at that moment. But I have to say there's a big deception in this shot. On the left side, outside of the frame, there was about 1,000 migrant workers in a camp about 50 yards away. And I think to the right of the frame was where the family car was parked. And I'll talk about the importance of the automobile in just a second. So there's some deception here, and it's framed this way, and it's deliberate, unfortunately. Dorthea is trying to emphasize the isolation and hopelessness, and I'll read her quote in just a moment. To give you a little visual, this is the car that Dorthea drove up to the lean-to in 1936. This is a 1934 Woody Ford V8. Pretty fancy car for the time. And Dorthea is sitting on the roof here, and she's holding the camera that she used to take the migrant mother photo. And it's a huge shoebox size camera. Just amazing that she could handhold that camera. You know, Dorthea was only about 5 feet tall. So here's a picture of her photographing some kids, also in California, and you can see she's the size relationship of Dorthea to the camera. I can't imagine. I probably wouldn't be able to handle that camera. And that speaks to her skill. Here's a photo of her boss, Roy Stryker. He was an economist by training, but he turned into a very sophisticated public relations guy, and he led the propaganda of the photos. And he's the guy that was delivering the creative briefs.
Now, am I correct in assuming that Stryker was a new dealer?
Oh, definitely. He was working for basically he was 2 steps away from FDR in terms of his boss, Stryker's boss name was Tugwell. And I think Tugwell was in constant conversation with FDR. So Stryker was he was in the inner circle. Okay. And yeah, he was fully on board with big agra, and you know, they, if I can just mention, it got ridiculous. They accused the Oklahoma farmers called Okies. You know, they called them Okies. Uh, that was a big part of the population that migrated west to pick crops. They all came from family farms. Most of them had a farm, and the government said that the Dust Bowl was created by poor farming practices, and that if they had education from the government, that wouldn't have happened. It's ridiculous. It's like climate change, you know. It was simply a drought, and there was the boll weevil, and it destroyed the crops. That's what happened. But what a thing to say about a group of people, all family farmers. They were too stupid to know how to treat the land. That was basically the message. And it was written on a lot of the on a lot of the photographs, and that kind of copy was picked up by the newspapers.
Now, Ron,
So
do you see a connection there with these mythologies, contemporaneous mythologies that were constructed back in the so-called New Deal, with some of the the present mythologies that we're seeing around global warming and climate change and all the other fairy
absolutely, it's
tales?
the same thing. It's the same thing. You remember
Incredible.
the Club of Rome started the what we're calling climate change. They started it saying that we were going to have a new ice age.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it evolved. Then it evolved into oh no, it's not an ice age. It's global warming. And but all of it was uh, supposedly caused by humans. The anthropogenic climate change, and
Hmm.
they've never changed their narrative on that. And this propaganda program regarding the migrant workers in the depression is the same thing. They were blaming it on the people. And the weather, I tell you, my opinion, the weather hasn't changed. You're gonna have droughts, you're gonna have hurricanes, you're gonna have too much rain. It's all just natural. That's my opinion. All right, so what this illustrates the boss, Roy Stryker. There he is, Roy Stryker. If he didn't like something, he'd punch a hole in the negative.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was actually destroying government property, because this whole program is, of course, taxpayer funded. And I should mention for your viewers that they can see all of this on uh, the Library of Congress online, loc.gov. You can go there and you can see all of these fabulous photos. I think there's 200,000, and they've digitized, I would say they've digitized about half of them. And there's no copyright on it. If you have a favorite photo, you can download it and print it, put it on your wall. Don't buy one online from some guy for 150 bucks. You can get it for free. All right. Now we'll get to the two-story part right now. And how am I doing on time?
We're at 38 minutes. I'll let you know when we're closing in on an hour.
Okay, good. Well, it sounds like I got plenty of time. I'm getting near the end here of my current research. All right. So we've we've talked about the paparazzi. We've talked about the enthusiastic propagandist, Dorthea, with the modification that I think she thought she was always helping her husband Paul Taylor, uh, who it turns out he was a good. When I first looked at Paul Taylor, I was reading about him. I thought, oh, this he could be a socialist. Not the case at all. It's a good guy. We can't go into that right now. All right, so here's the government story, and I have to read this. These are quotes. The first one is from Roy Stryker. He's the big boss. He's the one that wrote the shot list, the creative brief. And here's what he says about the migrant mother photo. The migrant mother photo has achieved near mythical status, symbolizing, if not defining, an entire era in United States history. It's the ultimate photo of the Depression era. Lange never surpassed it. To me, it was the picture. The others were marvelous, but that was special. She, referring to Florence Owens Thompson, the migrant mother, is immortal. Okay, that's Roy. And I think when he said that Dorthea never surpassed it, Dorthea was, from that point on, she was living in the shadow of that photograph, and unfortunately. But she did, as we're going to discuss in just a moment, she did surpass it. All right, now here's what Dorthea Lange said about the encounter. And keep in mind my theory of the paparazzi. I saw and approached a hungry and desperate mother as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions. I made 5 exposures, working closer and closer from the same direction. I did not ask her name or her history. She told me her age, that was 32. She said that she had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that her children killed. She had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. There she sat in the lean-to with her children huddled around her, and she thought that my pictures might help her, and so she helped me. Amazing. All right.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So that's basically, that's the government story. And now, 43 years later, Florence Owens Thompson reveals herself. What happened? It's a great story. I mean, this is 43 years later. In 1979, a Modesto newspaper published a commemorative article on the migrant mother photo. And, you know, it's always been a symbol of that whole Depression era. And newspapers were doing this a lot. And finally, Florence had had enough, and she revealed herself and that she was still alive and she was living in Modesto. And she sent a letter to this newspaper, and basically it started with, what did she say here? The exact quote, "I wish she hadn't taken my picture." And then she went on to say how she never got a dime for it, and she was ashamed of the conditions. She didn't want to be photographed, but she was never. She never sold the tires for food. Nobody was killing birds or eating frozen vegetables. And then that was the beginning, and we got the whole family's story because Florence went on to, at the time of the photograph, she had 7 children, and she went on to have 10 children. She had a huge family. Well, the kids that were there during the photo shoot, when the incident happened, they spoke up too, and the other famous quote, I have to kind of summarize their story, but the other famous quote is, Mama, and this is by her son, Troy Owens, Mama was always afraid that the government would take her children away. And that's how she was her whole life. Wow. That tells us a lot different. That's a lot different story. So you go back and you look at this face, and that's what you're seeing. She wants this. The government is right there in front of her, and she does not want to antagonize them. She does not want to be found out. She just wants the government to go away. That's what I see in the face. And by the way, I've looked at hundreds and hundreds. There are a lot of famous photographers, and I've looked at their photos, also working for the Farm Security Administration. And I tell you, I have never seen hopelessness, poverty, destitution. I've never seen that. What I've always seen without coaching is strength, endurance, self-reliance. Sometimes they look a little tired. The people look a little tired because they're on the road all the time. They're living rough. But I never see anyone that's going to give up. That's been my, going back to facial gestalt. That's what I see. So, all right. So, we're almost at the end here of this focus.
So this is an aerial view of the Nipomo area. Nipomo,
yes,
California.
this is the satellite view, and all right. So here's what we learned from the Thompson family. They were on their way to Watsonville, which is north. And if you look at the satellite view, I've marked with a blue arrow right next to what's called Thompson Avenue. And I'm wondering, did Nipomo name Thompson Avenue after Florence? That's something I got to find out. But anyway.
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Thompson Avenue was 101 in 1936. Okay. And
which means it was a major north to south of highway, not a freeway, right? 101.
Yeah, this of course was before, it was a highway. It was a well-maintained highway.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look to the lower left, you see the, let's say the upper left, you see the red rectangle up here. See my cursor?
I don't see the cursor, but.
Okay, how about the red rectangle?
I don't see, is that by the creek over there?
Uh-huh.
Delasugi's Creek, or creek, if you will?
Yes, yes. All right,
Okay.
well, never mind. I think we've got a different view based on our screens. But anyway, the current 101 is down, it runs down the left side of this photograph. parallel to Thompson Avenue. And
Okay, now I see the cursor. It's
oh,
moving.
good.
Yeah,
And
maybe it's going too fast or
oh, I'm sorry. Do
no.
you see where? Do you see it now? It's stopped.
No, no,
No.
it's
All
okay.
right. Well, this slide may not be helpful right now. I'll
This is current anyway. That was like McDonald's showing in all these contemporary stores and
yeah.
shops.
Well, yeah. This is a Google satellite view.
Oh, I see. I can see the badge of the 101 right next to the McDonald's.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the current 101 freeway now. Now it's a freeway. And Thompson was the original 101 highway.
Right.
I
And
get
that
it.
makes a difference because that's the road that both Dorthea and the Thompson family were traveling on, and they were both headed north. Dorthea was headed back to Berkeley, and as we find out, the Thompson family was heading to Watsonville, where they had placement as pickers. Placement meaning they were hired,
Mhm.
so they had a job. And okay, so here's the story. They were headed to Watsonville. At the time, Florence's boyfriend was named Jim Hill, and they both had placement in Watsonville, and that's where they were headed. And as they were approaching or nearing Napomo, Jim wanted to pull over and tighten the timing chain, and it's like a fan belt. And so what he did was pull off somewhere, and he was observing what I'm calling grapes of wrath etiquette, which is very important. It was dangerous for migrants to stop and blend into a picker camp, because those were all patrolled. The farm owner had people patrolling those camps to make sure that there was no squatters. It's another big story. So they would be observing that. They didn't want to antagonize anybody, so they pulled off, and they and then Jim worked on the timing chain, and he broke it. And when it broke, it whipped across and punctured the radiator. So it was just like what it just got getting worse and worse. So he took the radiator out, he took the timing chain, they put it in a hand cart that apparently they had already. It was strapped onto the car somehow, part of the luggage that they carried. And Jim and two of Florence's sons, two boys, went into Napomo and got it repaired. So they had money. And while they were gone, Dorthea shows up in her big shiny Ford, the Woody station wagon.
The
And,
V8.
and so following the Grapes of Wrath etiquette, they've pitched the lean-to separate from other people. So it's perfect for Dorthea, who can claim that they were huddled and isolated and with no hope. But what Dorthea doesn't tell you is that they were obviously sheltering. It was temporary. It was very temporary. No stove, no sleeping arrangements, no bedding, and everyone at the time would know the difference between sheltering and camping. So when they got back, when Jim got back with the radiator and the chain, he reinstalled it, got the car running, and they proceeded on their journey to Watsonville, and they got there late afternoon. It was about a 3-hour drive, and they pitched their tent, which we've never seen, and fulfilled their placement, and they worked up in Watsonville. That's what happened. So I should. Can you see that? This is looking outside out of the driver's side window on Thompson Avenue. This is also Google Street View. This is what it looks like when you're just outside of Napomo. And what the thing I want to point out is the eucalyptus trees. If you can see my cursor, this dark line here,
That
this is,
ridge, yeah.
yeah, this is eucalyptus trees, and it's actually not a ridge. They're just lining the side of a field.
Uh-huh.
The point is that, as we both know, you're California.
It's a windbreak. It's a windbreak, correct?
It's a windbreak, and
Yeah.
you see them everywhere in California, especially in that coastal valley. And you know, a stand of eucalyptus look just like every stand of eucalyptus. This is the view looking through the high school property, and this stand of eucalyptus is adjacent to the approved site. Okay, and in this photo, it's believed that these young eucalyptus were, and I don't have a photo from a modern photo, but essentially these are the mature eucalyptus. They claim that this is the same stand, and it could be, you know, it could be. But I'll tell you, if this was, if the approved site was actually where they set up the lean-to, the car was parked there.
Mm-hmm.
It was very common back then. A man could fix his car back then. Okay, you could take the, look at this. They took the top of the engine off, and
Yeah.
and they helped each other. These are probably 3 different families helping one guy on his car. The car was very important.
Well, you know, not long ago, Ron, this site was quite common even when we were kids. They were called shade tree mechanics.
Yeah,
They'd work on the car in the yard or maybe in the driveway if they had one.
yeah.
And all the neighborhood men would come over and help out.
Yeah, because it was interesting. It was entertaining. You know, I saw that going on in the 60s.
Yes.
But you don't see it anymore
Of course
because
not.
it's computerized. And so anyway, this photo was also taken by Dorthea Lange, and you can see the eucalyptus trees. This is a different location, but there's eucalyptus trees right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an anecdote, and we're almost done. As an anecdote from the family, this is very interesting. Florence, her kids bought a house for her in Modesto, a proper home. And she moved in, Florence moved in, and she lived there for a couple of years. And in fact, she was interviewed, I think she was interviewed in that home when they first found her, when the press first realized that the migrant mother was alive in Modesto. But after a couple of years, she didn't like it. And she told her kids, hey, I want to move into a trailer. I want a trailer. And the kids defined that and for us as she always loved to be on wheels.
Mm-hmm.
She could sleep at night. She felt more comfortable on wheels because there was she always had that notion that if things got bad, she could move on. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
So there's no way that how much time we got?
Well, we're running out, and I'd like to pick up this conversation when you get into Dorthea Lange's photographs of the Japanese American concentration camps, especially how they contrast with her contemporary Ansel Adams. That's another discussion, a lengthy discussion.
It is, and I'll just end with the short description. This is a
Well,
this
let's
is,
make this a teaser for next time, but go ahead. We'll wrap here, and
yeah, we'll
then
wrap it here.
okay.
Yeah, this is one of the Dorthea shots, and all I need to say at this point as the teaser is that you can see from this shot, these are the Japanese Americans on the day that they're being relocated by bus and train from Oakland and San Francisco, and they're being incarcerated. And Dorthea went to Manzanar, and she photographed the conditions at Manzanar. And by now she's, this is 6 or 7 years later, and she's a very accomplished photojournalist. And she's so good that the government has impounded approximately 760 photos the public has never seen. That tells you how powerful they are. So,
We're going to have to get those. We're going to have to sue the government for those or
yeah,
get
a
FOIA request.
Yeah. So thank you, Daryl. I think that's a complete story. Do you have any questions?
Oh, it's incredible. You know, I can just go on and effuse in the way that you have disrupted the historiography of surrounding Dorthea Lange in American modern photography. But I'll let the people in the comment section do that on my behalf.
Oh, fantastic.
We'll continue this conversation because this is a true breakthrough, and it's right in the spirit of what this channel is meant to be, and that is disrupting the historiography, just like our colleague George Webb disrupted the whole historiography of an entire era.
Absolutely.
And we're doing it as citizen investigators, journalists, forensic analysts.
Yeah.
And we don't need no stinking badges.
So true.
Okay, Ron, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Daryl. And
okay.
We'll be talking soon.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.